Get stealing, woo, wheeling, dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun. Yeah! Kurt Angle, yeah! Why, Triple H, you son of a tell me why! And Tony Khan, this is also on you!
I am going to ruin wrestling.
Just get over it!
What is up? What is up? What is up, ladies and gentlemen? It is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky DeRays, right here on episode 11 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. It is Sunday, July 6th, 2025. We are a week away from AEW's biggest show of the year, All In Texas. Of course, the show headlined by Hangman Adam Page, taking on Jon Moxley for the AEW World Championship. And everybody is crossing their fingers. Everybody is crossing their fingers for the Hangman to get the win. Because everybody is tired of Jon Moxley's reign of terror. Of course, we're going to be talking about All In right here on the show. Plus, we got 3 WWE shows this weekend. 3. NXT Great American Bash, Saturday night's main event, and WWE Evolution. So we're going to be talking about that as well. Oh, did I mention happy 4th of July weekend, everybody? Yes, happy 4th of July weekend, everybody. I hope you guys all celebrated with your families. But we're here, right here on YouTube, and we're going to be talking about all things professional wrestling right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Before we get into all this craziness, please make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc channel right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content, and as the friggin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, if you guys are watching the WrestleHavoc Podcast on WNN platforms, that being the WNN app, the Facebook page, or the YouTube channel, I thank you guys very much. Of course, we're going to be talking about all things professional wrestling right here on this edition of the show. We're going to be talking about All In, all that stuff. Britt Baker's also in the news. Apparently, she wants to leave AEW as she isn't being utilized on television. But there's a lot of different perspectives when it comes to that story. So we're going to be talking about that and much more right here on episode 11 of the WrestleHavoc Podcast. But without any further ado, let's get straight into the show. And we're going to start off, ironically, I just mentioned Britt Baker, but we are actually going to be starting off with Britt Baker. Britt Baker has been in the news throughout this week. Of course, Britt Baker is the former AEW Women's World Champion. And everybody is curious about her status with the company. Of course, the last time we saw her, I believe, was in the fall. And apparently, Britt Baker wants out from AEW, according to Bodyslam.net. But Britt Baker did put out a cryptic Instagram story. And you know all these wrestlers, because you know these wrestlers know that the fans will tend to fall for the bait. But these wrestlers always post cryptic posts on social media. Britt Baker posted this on a recent Instagram story, and it was a quote by Kobe Simmons. It states this, and I quote, "A bottle of water can be $1 at a supermarket, $3 at the gym, $5 at the movies, $6 on a plane. Same water. The only thing that has changed its value was the place." And ironically, that sentence is the one that is highlighted. Continuing on, it states, and I quote, "So next time you feel your worth is nothing, maybe you're at the wrong place." And ironically, a report came out, of course, according to Bodyslam.net. I'm reading this from Wrestling Inc.'s website. According to sources close to Mark O'Brien of WrestleMobs and Bodyslam.net, former AEW Women's World Champion Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, is actively seeking to part ways with the company, confirming the long-standing rumor that has circulated on social media throughout the year that Baker was on the verge of leaving the company. These rumors were only amplified by Britt Baker herself just a few days ago when she posted her picture on her Instagram story, which has a quote, "Same water, the only thing that has changed its value was the place," and that was highlighted. The reason that was relayed to WrestleMobs and Bodyslam.net for Baker wanting out of AEW was down to a combination of burning various bridges with people backstage, the atmosphere and the company changing around her, and the fact that she has essentially achieved all that there is to achieve in AEW. Baker is reportedly under a contract until the start of 2026 at the earliest, so she has a long ways to go, by the way, and from what it looks like, she wants out. With AEW having the right to add on time that she has missed through her injury, which in Baker's case could keep her in the company until probably the end of 2026. However, AEW are reportedly not looking to release Baker at this time. Okay, there's a lot to digest when it comes to Britt Baker. I'm going to say this right here and right now. I'm a big fan of Britt Baker. I feel like her best work was all the way back in 2020, 2021. Because remember when AEW first started, people need to understand that she was the first woman signed to AEW when AEW first started all the way back in 2019. She was the first woman signed to the promotion. And everybody, of course, was hyping up Britt Baker. They booked her as a babyface in the beginning, but of course, there was more money for her as a heel, and they established that back in 2020 during the pandemic, and she became an even bigger star coming out of the pandemic, and she became the AEW Women's World Champion. So Britt Baker was, of course, a former AEW Women's World Champion. She was flying high. I could make the argument that her best matches was with Thunder Rosa. Britt Baker's best matches were with Thunder Rosa, of course. I'm talking about the St. Patrick's Day episode of Dynamite where she and Thunder Rosa main evented that show, and that was still during the pandemic. They main evented the show, and they had a street fight, and it was arguably one of the best women's matches in AEW history. Not only that, it was not only, in my opinion, not only one of the best women's matches in AEW, but one of the best women's matches in women's wrestling. And we're going to be talking a lot about women's wrestling on this show when we talk about Evolution, but that's another story for another time. But also, she had a year later a match against Thunder Rosa inside of a steel cage where Thunder Rosa became the AEW Women's World Champion. And ironically, I mentioned Thunder Rosa winning the AEW Women's World Championship. I mentioned that because of the fact that, of course, there was a lot of drama behind the scenes when it comes to Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. It is very well known. And the story goes is that, as you guys all know, Thunder Rosa became the AEW Women's Champion, and for at least maybe 3 months, I believe, 3 or 2 months into her reign, she all of a sudden announces that she is injured and she's not going to forfeit the AEW Women's Championship, but instead they're going to crown an interim champion. I believe that was how the story went. This was 3 years ago. Keep in mind, this was 3 years ago. And according to the story, Britt Baker was upset considering she wrestled injured while she was injured, and Thunder Rosa, she had a minor injury, and all of a sudden she's not going to show up to work. That was the main gist of Britt Baker's real life issue with Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa, of course, I believe eventually came back, and I believe she forfeited the AEW Women's World Championship. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then there started to swirl stories about Britt Baker and her backstage attitude, considering, you know, she was not only the first woman signed to AEW, but not only that, she had some stroke in the locker room. She had some pull in the locker room. And another crazy thing about Britt Baker was, of course, if you fast forward all the way to 2024, she had an issue with MJF, and she actually got suspended over this issue. Apparently, the story goes is that MJF was getting ready for his match against Will Ospreay, which lasted 1 hour on television, by the way. It was a 1 hour match, so it was definitely going to be a grueling match for MJF. And the story goes was roughly before the match started, or before the show went on the air, I believe, Britt Baker was upset, and she was talking a lot of smack about MJF and his current girlfriend, Alicia, too, about stuff in the past. And there was a lot of dirt sheet reports coming out stating that MJF barged into the women's locker room and he threatened Britt Baker, which was not true, by the way, because if that was the case, MJF would have been the guy that would have been suspended, but MJF was not the guy that was suspended. And MJF went on record and stated, all of the reports that you see are not true at all. So apparently the story goes was that Britt Baker was allegedly upset, and she was talking a lot of smack towards MJF and Alicia, too, who I believe AEW hired during that period of time. But from what is documented, clearly Britt Baker was an issue. Clearly Britt Baker was an issue in the women's locker room. And from what it looks like, she did have a bad attitude. Now, am I going to sit here and say all of those stories that we hear about Britt Baker all over the internet are true? I don't know. The only person that knows are the people in the AEW locker room and the people that are, or I should say the people that are in the AEW locker room, or Britt Baker herself. That's all I'm going to say about that. But you can't deny that Britt Baker was at least one of their top stars, at least in the women's division throughout the last couple of years. And another incident that I want to talk about was last year. Of course, she came back. She got suspended roughly before her big match with Mercedes Moné, which ended up being a dud. It was not really that good of a match. Britt Baker was set to feud with Serena Deeb. And what happened was they had a segment on television, on Dynamite, and Serena Deeb comes out. I believe Britt Baker just finished a match. And Britt Baker outright, and the camera shows this, and I'm not going to sit here and not point the blame at Britt Baker, but the AEW production team is absolutely terrible. I'm not a fan of AEW's production because they always, either miss spots or they tend to show things that you're not supposed to show when you're producing wrestling. But they flat out pointed the camera at Britt Baker, and Britt Baker, without the microphone, she flat out says, "Nobody cares." And it came across so bad. It came across so bad to the point where a lot of people took that to social media and were like, dude, is Britt Baker going into business for herself? And we all know going into business for yourself is a big no-no in pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is all about trust. And that looked very bad on Britt Baker. Britt Baker looked really horrible. Like you're trying to sell a feud. I'm not saying that Serena Deeb versus Britt Baker would have been a groundbreaking feud. No, it was not. It was just going to be a generic women's feud. But again, if you're working with somebody else and you go out of your way on television and state nobody cares without the microphone, just like literally in the ring, just dangling in the ring and saying nobody cares, you're acting like you don't care at all, then we got a problem. And then since then, I believe Britt Baker hasn't been seen on AEW television since. Britt Baker hasn't been seen on AEW television for almost a year now. In a couple months, it's going to mark a year. And I'm going to say this right here and right now. I think it's a little bit of a travesty that Britt Baker is not being utilized on television. But at the same time, I think AEW does have a valid reason as to why they're keeping Britt Baker off television. Because learning from the whole CM Punk madness, I feel like Tony Khan is in a position where he's like, hey, I don't want another headache in my locker room. Now, granted, CM Punk, you can call him a headache, but at the same time, he does have some valid reasons as to why he's upset. But that's another story for another time. Britt Baker, on the other hand, is not CM Punk. She is a big star, but she's not CM Punk. Britt Baker, as reported by a lot of reports throughout the past couple of years, did have an attitude problem. But again, it's up to Tony Khan to really mend fences and talk to Britt Baker. If Britt Baker clearly has a problem with AEW and she wants out, release her. Tony Khan has a tendency to have issues with a lot of guys, not even have a lot of issues with a lot of guys. A lot of wrestlers in AEW, whenever they're not booked or essentially not being booked, they're essentially benched. What do I mean by benched? They're basically sitting at home or sitting in catering, doing absolutely nothing and collecting a paycheck. And then these talents get frustrated. People need to understand. It'd be great for you to do nothing and get a nice paycheck. It's great. But at the same time, pro wrestlers are built differently. Pro wrestlers are, they care about their craft and they care about their profession. And a lot of pro wrestlers do not like being benched. What's the point of them flying all the way to another state or another city only for them to sit in catering and do nothing? Britt Baker, in this case, she's not sitting in catering. She's literally at home doing nothing. And she wants to do something on television, and AEW is not giving her anything to do on television. And now we see these reports of Britt Baker wanting to leave the promotion, according to bodyslam.net. Not to mention, she posts this cryptic story on Instagram talking about if the prices have changed in a certain area, the problem is not you, the problem is the place. Clearly, that is a reference to Britt Baker and her experience in AEW throughout the past, at least the past year, I should say. So I don't know. It's a weird situation, in my opinion. I think Britt Baker is a big enough star, and she maybe can. She once her contract is up, which is probably by the end of 2026, she probably could use WWE for leverage. You know for a fact, whenever her contract would be up, WWE is willing to pick her up. Simply because of the fact that she was a top star in AEW, 100%. But again, could WWE afford a lot of the problems that Britt Baker has? in terms of her attitude backstage, because that is a very clear issue in terms of Britt Baker backstage in AEW. Now, comparing her to CM Punk, a lot of people create the argument of, oh, well, clearly AEW was the issue considering, there's no issues with CM Punk in WWE backstage. You want to know why that is? It's because WWE is watching CM Punk 24/7. Not only that, WWE is a way more professional environment. They are a publicly traded company. It's very different than AEW. AEW is only establishing itself, and they've only existed for 6 years. You know what I'm saying? It's a very different environment. Britt Baker, although she has her attitude problems, although there's a lot of issues involving Britt Baker with the whole Thunder Rosa situation, with the MJF incident, her talking smack about Alicia too. Apparently, her and Jamie Hayter are no longer friends. Apparently, that is the story. I mean, dude, I think we're at a point where I think Britt Baker needs to look at herself in the mirror and look at herself as probably the problem, but I don't think that is the case. This is just me making assumptions. I'm not Britt Baker, so I don't know what I'm dealing with. And honestly, who is for me to say? But if you're not being utilized on television, of course she's going to have a problem with that. And not only that, I mean, we do have the Casino Gauntlet this Saturday at All In. Could she make a surprise return? Who knows? But there's another thing where a lot of people are talking about in terms of talent in AEW not being utilized. A lot of people are talking about a lot of the day one people, the people that started in AEW since the first day the company was announced, since day one. A lot of day one people are being pushed to the side, and Britt Baker is one of those people. And on one hand, it's a very shady thing to do because you're favoring new talent over talent that's stuck with you thin since the beginning. But people need to understand that promotions always evolve. When you're running a business, when you're running a promotion, you always need fresh new talent. You always need fresh new talent because you're trying to build towards the future. And in terms of Britt Baker, it sucks that she's not being utilized, but maybe there could be a valid reason as to why Tony Khan is not utilizing her. Maybe Tony Khan does not want to deal with all of her backstage drama. I have no idea. I'm not defending Britt Baker. I'm not defending Tony Khan. I think it all depends on a serious case of them sitting in a room and hashing it all out. Does Tony Khan sign her eventual release from AEW? Does Britt Baker come back to television? We're going to have to wait and see. Because you guys need to understand, it's not like Britt Baker's contract is up. Britt Baker's contract is not up at all. Britt Baker, her contract is up all the way till 2026, till next year, and most likely to the end of next year. So she has a long time until her contract is up. But she wants to leave now, as the reports are saying. If she wants to leave now, I think it's in Tony Khan's best interest to let her go. Why are you, this is what bothers me about Tony Khan. If you have people that want to leave, let them leave. What Tony Khan does is he just lets them sit at home while they're doing nothing with them. We've seen this time and time again. We've seen this with Rey Fenix. More recently, we've seen this with Ricky Starks. You remember last year, Ricky Starks wanted to be utilized on television so badly. Ricky Starks looks like a star, and they're not even utilizing Ricky Starks at all because they had no plans for him. They had no plans for Ricky Starks at all. So what does Ricky Starks do? Ricky Starks, he ends up going to the Independents. He shows up at a GCW show at American Dream Mall, which I, by the way, was there. I was there when he made his GCW appearance. And they announced Ricky Starks for another GCW show, I believe in a month later. And unfortunately, what happened was AEW pulled Ricky Starks from that GCW show. Now, the reason as to why they pulled Ricky Starks from that GCW show was because of the fact of Effie, who is a wrestler that wrestles for GCW, talked smack about Tony Khan on his recent podcast. And that, of course, led to Tony Khan allegedly being upset and pulling Ricky Starks off the show. Now, what's the problem here? Number one, if you are a promoter like Tony Khan, I could care less about what others say about me. If I'm a promoter, I don't care. I don't care because I got more money than you. and I can make situations go away like that. But I feel like the guy who was hurt the most was Ricky Starks, because they announced a match with Ricky Starks at a GCW show and they pulled him off the show. So think about this. You're in a situation where you want to be utilized on national television, but your current promotion that you are currently signed to is not doing anything for you. And they're essentially benching you, but you do have the option to work the independents. So you do work the independents. You make a big splash at a GCW show, and then you get announced for another GCW show, only for them to essentially pull you out of that show. It sucks. It's a terrible situation. Many wrestlers have dealt with Tony Khan and his poor decision making. Like, dude, if you are a wrestler in AEW, if this is what Tony Khan should do. If you have wrestlers on your roster that don't want to be utilized at all, just let them go. Let them go. Some people may create the argument of, hey, but then they're going to go straight to WWE. Yeah, they're going to go straight to WWE. What else? Where else? What's the problem with that? If they don't want to be here, let them go. If Britt Baker does not want to be in AEW, let her go. That's it. That's all you got to do. Why are you wasting money on somebody that you are actively not utilizing on your roster? Why? Because I guarantee you Britt Baker is getting paid big bucks. She's getting paid millions of dollars, by the way. You know, some people may create the argument that Tony Khan is overpaying in terms of his talent, and you may think that is true. But imagine you are overpaying somebody for them to do nothing. Isn't that just wasting money? I don't know, man. I don't know. But in terms of Britt Baker, either Britt Baker hashes it out with Tony Khan and she returns to television, or Tony Khan eventually just signs her release. That is it. Maybe you can just add a non-compete there. I don't know. But, I mean, this whole Britt Baker thing, it really does suck. Yeah, Britt Baker has caused problems with the locker room. But at the end of the day, I mean, look, wrestling is not all sunshine and rainbows when you're in a backstage environment. It's like any other job in the world. You're going to deal with people that you don't like working with. That's just the nature of not only the business, but that is just the nature of life. That is just the nature of life. It's the nature of life. And what Britt Baker, I feel like, look, I think Britt Baker does have a big ego. That's just my opinion. I genuinely do believe that she has a big ego, but I feel like I don't think she's actively trying to shove herself down everybody's throats. I feel like she actively cares about AEW. But at the same time, if you're in Tony Khan's position, you have a business to run. And it's not all centered around Britt Baker. So yeah, if Britt Baker wants to leave, Tony Khan should just sign on her release, end off, and that's it. Let her go somewhere else. Let her go to WWE. And you know for a fact WWE would sour at the fact that they got Britt Baker. You know they're going to get Britt Baker once her contract is up. You know they're going to get Britt Baker. Why wouldn't you get Britt Baker? I mean, look at what they did with Mariah May. Mariah May had a 1-year contract with AEW. She used AEW as leverage, which is a smart move if you are a wrestler. I think I should advocate for a lot of wrestlers. Know your worth. Know your worth. Mariah May was smart. She signed a 1-year deal with AEW, and in a 1-year span, in less than a year, a couple months into her run, she became the AEW Women's Champion. Now, granted, she had a lackluster run as the champion, but she had a phenomenal story with Toni Storm. And the whole feud with her and Toni Storm bumped her stock. It bumped her stock up, and she became a valuable asset to WWE. And now she's signed with NXT, and she's going to do great things in WWE right now. I refuse to call her, what is her current name? I completely forgot. Blake Monroe. Blake Monroe. That's Mariah May's current name. But Britt Baker, I mean, look, Britt Baker, she's not the best in-ring performer, but she is somebody who is marketable. And AEW, at least when they were pushing her on top, she was 100% marketable. If WWE got their hands on Britt Baker, they are going to market her 1,000 times better than AEW did. Now, granted, I'm not going to sit here and say AEW did a bad job with them marketing Britt Baker, because they actively did. They did. When she was the champion, oh my God, she was everywhere. But if WWE ever gets their hands on Britt Baker, you know they're going to market her like a top star, and she's going to shoot straight to the main roster. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Britt Baker. All right, moving on. In terms of AEW, of course, we got All In Texas. All In Texas is going to be taking place this coming Saturday. Now, normally All In throughout the past 2 years took place at Wembley Stadium. They announced the show for Texas, and it's going to be taking place at Globe Life Field, and that stadium holds roughly around 40,000 people. Now, I will say this. AEW did struggle to sell a lot of tickets for this show. Their initial capacity for this show, the initial capacity of tickets that they were going to be selling was around 18,000. They bumped it up to 23,000. As of right now, the ticket sales for All In Texas are relatively strong. According to WrestleTix, and you guys see the chart right over here, this is the tweet that I edited. Well, I didn't edit the tweet, but you guys know what I'm saying. I added both images right next to each other. I don't know why I mentioned that on my show. But according to WrestleTix, the current setup is 23,740, and they distributed well over 20,400 tickets, which is great. But I will say, could they have shoot for the 40,000 mark? Yeah. Would they have been successful? No. But I will say this is a really good house for AEW. Not to mention, this is actually going to be the largest gate that they have drawn in the United States. Not of all time. That honor goes to AEW All In, the first AEW All In, where they drew 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium. I'm talking about only in the United States. So they beat the record of the very first AEW Grand Slam, which took place at Arthur Ashe Stadium all the way back in 2021. I put out a recent video on my YouTube channel, and the link will be in the description below. I'll put it in the description later on. But I put out a video, and the title was AEW in 2025 is not better than AEW in 2021. I put out that video because I've seen a lot of discourse about everybody stating that AEW is in a much better place now, all that stuff. And that is very much true. From a perception standpoint, AEW is in a much better place. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. They still make the same stupid mistakes that they made last year. But they are in a much better place. But I've also seen a lot of delusional people say on social media that AEW in 2025 is 10 times better than AEW at its peak, that being in 2021. And I tell people this all the time. You are lying to yourself if you say that. AEW in 2021 was not only their creative peak, AEW in 2021 was their, honestly, business peak. Because, yeah, they drew 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium back in 2023, but that was during a time when they were starting to experience their down period. They couldn't sell weekly television every week. What do I mean what do I mean when I say they couldn't sell weekly television every week? For the majority of 2023, weekly television was essentially half-empty arenas. Half-empty arenas. And, AEW still deals with that, even now. If you watch, Collision tapings, they tend to book I don't want to say large venues, but they book medium-sized venues, and they still can't fill those arenas up. But them moving to smaller venues as a whole for weekly TV, especially for Dynamite, has benefited AEW drastically. AEW in 2025 is not better than AEW in 2021. The best synopsis that I can give you is AEW in 2025 is 100 times better than AEW in 2024. Because from a perception standpoint, AEW was at their lowest point, that being last year. They were at their lowest point. From the moment they fired CM Punk in late 2023, a lot of the audience left. Why? Because they saw all of the drama, or essentially all of the backstage drama outshined a lot of the backstage drama outshined a lot of the stuff that you'd watch in terms of the actual in-ring product. And that's a shame. Think about this. They had a banger of a pay-per-view, and all of a sudden you have CM Punk go off on a media scrum. Is everybody talking about is everybody going to be talking about the pay-per-view? No, nobody's going to be talking about the pay-per-view. Everybody's going to be talking about the media scrum. And that was what AEW talked about constantly. It not only happened at All Out back in 2022, it happened almost a year later. Involving CM Punk in their biggest show of the year. What should have been the talking point was AEW selling 80,000 seats at Wembley Stadium. But instead, all people were talking about was the fight that he had with Jack Perry, which ultimately led to his firing. But that was the past. AEW in 2025 is in a much better place from a perception standpoint. Now, business-wise, Tony Khan may tell you that we're all up. We're up in the last couple of quarters. All things is great. And I hate talking about the ratings, but if you look at the numbers, AEW is relatively down. They average around 600 to 700,000 viewers a week. In 2021, they averaged around 1 million viewers every week. Clearly, the audience dropped. But in terms of All In, it's going to be a great house for All In. I'm very much excited about All In. I think it's going to be a great show. The card is absolutely stacked. And I'm actually going to be pulling up a tweet by Tony Khan talking about counter programming, because Tony Khan was interviewed a lot by a lot of outlets, a lot of media outlets, and he was talking about WWE counter programming AEW. And it is a great talking point, because if you really think about it, Tony Khan is the type of person that was not really that good when it comes to PR. He was not really that good when it comes to PR, and he would tend to fall for the bait. What do I mean by that? If WWE put a show head-to-head against their show, Tony Khan would essentially go on a Twitter tirade. He'd go scorched earth on Twitter. And the best example of this was all the way back in late 2023, where, of course, Dynamite went head-to-head against NXT, and he said a lot of things about Triple H and Shawn Michaels, and he eventually got cooked, as a lot of the kids would say nowadays. But nowadays, I feel like this whole down period of AEW, I feel like it has humbled Tony Khan a little bit. And a lot of his media responses as of late has been very professional, and you can tell Tony Khan has 100% learned from his mistakes. So in a recent quote by Tony Khan, he was asked about WWE counter programming AEW with 3 shows, because that is very true. They are counter programming AEW with 3 shows. One of them are going head-to-head with All In. 2 of them are not going head-to-head with All In, but that is still counter programming. He stated this, and I quote, "Well, I think we're going to put on a great event, and we have to focus on putting on the best event we can with the best wrestlers in the world. So that's a lot of fun. So we're going to have a great show next Saturday afternoon. We're focused on what AEW is doing and the AEW fans, and I think that's served us really well." That is arguably the most professional response that Tony Khan has given anybody. Arguably the most professional response that Tony Khan has given anybody. You can tell Tony Khan has learned from his mistakes. Now, is that going to translate from a creative standpoint? Absolutely not. It's not. But you can tell from a PR standpoint, Tony Khan is smart enough to know, hey, I got 3 shows going up head-to-head against my biggest show of the year. The best way to do the talking is not going scorched earth on social media. Instead, the best way to retaliate is just to put on the best show that I could possibly can. And that is what we're most likely going to be seeing at All In, because if you guys look at the card for All In, the card for All In is absolutely stacked. And it's not just for the top 3 matches, of course. We got a bunch of matches for All In Texas. I'm going to do a quick rundown and a preview for All In as we speak. Of course, we got the Young Bucks versus Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. And they added a stipulation. If Swerve and Ospreay win, the Young Bucks lose their EVP status. If the Young Bucks win, Swerve and Ospreay cannot challenge for the AEW Championship for 1 year. I'm going to tell you guys why this is a great stipulation. This is a great stipulation because, number one, it creates drama within Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay, because, of course, Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay are great friends. But in order to sell something, or in order to sell something compelling, you need drama. And the reaction of Swerve Strickland when Ospreay stated, if you guys win, we can't challenge for the AEW World Championship for a whole year. Dude, the look on Swerve Strickland's face says it all. He had a very pissed off look in his face saying, dude, what are you doing? You're actively screwing me over. But that is what you need in a match like this. You need drama. So that's a great stipulation. I genuinely believe that this match is going to be fantastic, man. I know a lot of people nowadays don't like the Young Bucks. I'm the type of person that genuinely believes that the hate that the Young Bucks get is one of the most forced things in all of wrestling. I think their hate is very forced. And if you watched the 300th episode of Dynamite this past Wednesday, they had a phenomenal match this past Wednesday, and it really showed the Young Bucks of old, which is great to see. But moving on, we have the Women's Casino Gauntlet match for a title shot for the AEW Women's World Championship. The only participant as we speak that is announced is Chris Statlander. This could be a great way for them to possibly bring back Britt Baker. Of course, Britt Baker was in the news. We recently talked about Britt Baker on this edition of the show in our first topic about how she wants to be let go from AEW. Maybe they could patch things out, and maybe they could have Britt Baker show up on this show. We're going to have to wait and see. Maybe we could have a scenario where Athena, there's a lot of talk about Athena, about how she's not being utilized on AEW television. Instead, she's being relegated to a third-rate brand, that being Ring of Honor. And she's been doing great things in Ring of Honor, but she's not doing anything in AEW. Technically, Ring of Honor is an AEW show, but you get my drift. Who watches Ring of Honor? Nobody. Nobody watches Ring of Honor. So there are going to be a lot of participants in the Women's Casino Gauntlet match, but it's going to be a very interesting match, to say the least. We also got the Men's Casino Gauntlet match for the AEW World Championship title shot. And the members that are announced in this gauntlet match are MJF, Mark Briscoe, and Mystico from CMLL. And there's only two possibilities in terms of the winner of this match. MJF or a returning Darby Allin could possibly be the guys that could win this Casino Gauntlet match. And I talked about this in one of my videos talking about Hangman Page and why he should win the AEW World Championship. I stated this. I stated that the outcome of Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page, the outcome of that match is essentially gonna be it's gonna be determined when it comes to the winner of the Men's Casino Gauntlet match. What do I mean by that? If MJF wins, I would assume that Hangman Page is going to go over, because a Hangman Page and MJF feud is money. It's a money feud right there. But if you have a scenario and you have a returning Darby Allin come back, if you have Darby Allin come back and he ends up winning the Casino Gauntlet match, there is no chance in hell that Hangman Page is going to go over. Keep in mind, Jon Moxley and Hangman Page has been announced as a Texas Death Match. Now, that's going to be a very interesting stipulation, because we've seen a Texas Death Match between Jon Moxley and Hangman Page before, all the way back at Revolution in 2023. But Hangman Page won that first match. Who's to say Jon Moxley could beat Hangman Page in this Texas Death Match once again? But we will talk about that later on as we run through this card. So I feel like the outcome of the main event all necessarily depends on this Men's Casino Gauntlet match. If MJF wins, Hangman Page is going to go over in the main event. If Darby Allin comes back, Hangman Page is going to lose, and Jon Moxley is going to go over in the main event. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, but it's a very intriguing match. I'm very curious to see what happens in the Men's Casino Gauntlet. TNT title on the line, as current champion Adam Cole will be defending his title against Kyle Fletcher of the Don Callis family. I think it's a no-brainer. I think they're going to give the belt to Kyle Fletcher, because there's anybody who is set for main event status, it is somebody like Kyle Fletcher. I've really been enjoying the work of Kyle Fletcher. His matches with Will Ospreay have been off the freaking chain. I mean, I was there live last year at the Prudential Center watching Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher. Their match was intense. It was awesome. But they also had their steel cage match this past March at Revolution. I think it's a no-brainer that Kyle Fletcher is going to win the TNT Championship. I mean, you have to give this guy a belt. You have to give this guy a title and push this guy to the moon. Now, if they have Kyle Fletcher go over, what are you going to do with Adam Cole? I feel like I'm genuinely at the belief where Adam Cole is just not really doing anything. Even though he is the current TNT champion, he's not really doing anything. And it sucks that he's not being placed in the main event scene, because Adam Cole is just so talented at what he does. But still, I don't know if I have faith in AEW in terms of what they're going to be doing with Adam Cole if they have Kyle Fletcher go over. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But my pick to win this match, Kyle Fletcher is going to be your new TNT champion at All In Texas. The World Tag Team titles are on the line. as Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin of the Hurt Syndicate will take on Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight, as they will take on, once again, Christian Cage and Nick Wayne. So we got 3 teams in this match: Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin, Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight, and Christian Cage and Nick Wayne. Christian Cage, I mean, look, I don't care what anybody says. Christian Cage, if there is any ex-WWE guy that has worked like a charm in AEW throughout the past couple of years, it is Christian Cage. I mean, the Christian Cage character, even though he is diabolical in terms of his character, he is super entertaining. And I'm digging the work that he's doing with Nick Wayne. Keep in mind, Nick Wayne is only 19 years old. Like, he is relatively young, and he is placed in a program with Christian Cage. Not in a one-on-one program, but they placed him in a storyline with Christian Cage where he is in kayfabe his father, which is great stuff. And they've been showing tension as of late. But who's going to be winning this match, man? We got Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, Mike Bailey and Kevin Knight, which are a great tag team, but I don't think they're going to be going over in this match. The only possibilities are either the Hurt Syndicate or Christian Cage and Nick Wayne. I'm going to go with Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin because they have been teasing some dissension when it comes to Christian Cage and Nick Wayne. Of course, I know AEW really desperately wants Adam Copeland to come back and have the reunion of Christian Cage and Adam Copeland to be a tag team. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. Some people are even creating the theory that Nick Wayne could possibly be the one to turn on Christian Cage, and they can essentially do a double turn as Christian Cage will turn babyface and Nick Wayne will turn heel. I could definitely see that being the case, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens. My pick to win this match, Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, and we're going to be having even more tension with Christian Cage and Nick Wayne. Winner takes all for the AEW Unified Championship. The brand new AEW Unified Championship. Now, I've already said my fair share about the AEW Unified Championship. I think the belt looks fantastic. The belt looks beautiful. My only problem is the name. The name Unified Championship is arguably the worst name for any championship. Why? Because you're going to cause confusion with your audience. I mean, you're already causing confusion with your audience when you have an international championship and a continental championship. That already, in and of itself, is causing confusion. I was always at the thought that having a continental championship made no sense at all. Because, as you guys know, they unveiled the Continental title when they were doing the Continental Classic, and when they were doing the initial Continental Classic. And it had a lot of fans scratching their heads, and rightfully so, because if you're going to have a round-robin tournament, instead of winning another championship that is eventually going to be pointless, because one of the biggest criticisms that AEW has as a product is the fact that they have way too many championships. It's almost as if, like, when you're watching the show, almost everybody has a championship. And at that point, if there is a sense of everybody holding a championship, it is only going to diminish the value of those titles. It's only going to diminish the value. And I was always at the belief that less is more. And the fact that they unveiled a brand new championship as the Unified Championship, it made no sense. Now, them unifying the International and the Continental title makes sense. But I think it would have been a little bit smarter for them to call this title the AEW Intercontinental Championship, because it's right then and there. The Intercontinental Championship would have made way more sense instead of calling it the Unified Championship. But some people are creating the theory that this could possibly be AEW's way of creating an unofficial secondary world championship, which, I mean, again, that could be the case. And it also sparked a lot of conversation in terms of the outcome of Hangman Page and Jon Moxley as well. But we got Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega. Of course, these guys are no strangers to one another. They've had classic bouts back in New Japan Pro Wrestling years ago, back in 2017, and arguably had a lot of people outside of New Japan, people in WWE, literally being like, "Oh my God, this is like literally the greatest match of all time." And it was. But when it comes to Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega, it's a very interesting match. simply because we've seen it many times in New Japan. But this is the first time we're going to be seeing a match this big on American soil, which I'm definitely excited about. You knew for a fact that once Tony Khan signed Kazuchika Okada last year, you knew for a fact that he wanted to do Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada. And I thought that they built this match relatively well. Could it have been better? Yes. Of course, it is now involving Kota Ibushi, which is, of course, Kenny Omega's longtime best friend. Of course, they were a tag team called the Golden Lovers. But the build involved Kota Ibushi. And, of course, they had an angle where Kenny Omega came back from the stomp that he suffered from Kazuchika Okada a couple of weeks prior on Dynamite, in which he was literally bleeding out blood from his mouth, which looked absolutely horrifying. And they brought back Kota Ibushi to try to do the angle where Kenny Omega comes back and makes the save for his best friend. And by the way, Kota Ibushi looks ripped. Because if you guys don't, I mean, Kota Ibushi was always a fantastic wrestler, but when they brought Kota Ibushi in back in 2023, of course, Kota Ibushi, he has dealt with a lot of injuries, especially in New Japan. He dealt with a lot of injuries, and he didn't really look like he was in the best shape. Now, when he came back, dude, Kota Ibushi is looking ripped, which is great. But, of course, they ran the angle of Kota Ibushi making this, not Kota Ibushi, Kenny Omega making the save towards Kota Ibushi. And, of course, they still got a match to sell, which is Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega. What are my thoughts on this match? Who do I think is going to win? I think this is probably going to be Kazuchika Okada's best match in AEW. I genuinely believe that. I feel like Kazuchika Okada's run in AEW, although it has been somewhat successful from a booking standpoint because he's won the Continental title, all that stuff, I genuinely feel like Kazuchika Okada could be doing more. I think AEW has leaned a lot towards the comedy aspect of Kazuchika Okada, which is not bad, by the way. I'm loving the comedy that Kazuchika Okada does, but at the same time, a lot of fans want to see the Kazuchika Okada from New Japan. And I feel like we've been getting bits of that throughout the past couple months on AEW television, and I feel like we're going to be getting the full Kazuchika Okada going up against Kenny Omega this coming Saturday, and I think it's going to be a phenomenal match for All In Texas. This is the perfect match for All In. You knew for a fact that Tony Khan was going to book this match. Like, from the moment Kenny Omega came back from his diverticulitis, you knew he was going to book a match like this. So, yeah, we're going to be getting Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega. My pick, Kenny Omega wins, and he becomes the brand new unified champion. All right. The AEW Women's World Championship is on the line as Toni Storm will be taking on Mercedes Moné. So this is another match where everybody should have known that this match was going to take place. Like, everybody should have known that this match was going to be taking place. A lot of people wanted Athena to be in this spot. Everybody wanted a match. Everybody wanted to have a match such as Athena versus a Mercedes for the TBS title. I mean, imagine Athena versus Mercedes at Globe Life Field at All In. Dude, that would have been a huge match right there. And they had a phenomenal match a couple of months ago. I believe it was a part of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. I believe it was in the first round or the semifinals. Correct me if I'm wrong, of the Owen Hart Cup tournament. It was a phenomenal match. They tore the house down. They absolutely tore the house down. But of course, as you guys all know, Athena is not really doing anything as of right now on AEW TV, and that's a problem. But we're getting Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné, and you can't blame Tony Khan because that match is a much bigger match for a show like All In, which is going to be taking place in a stadium. So we got Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné. Mercedes Moné fairly recently at Grand Slam Mexico, at Arena Mexico, won the CMLL women's title. So she has like 6 titles at her arsenal. She has like 6 championships. I do not know how she's able to hold all of those titles. I'm being serious. I'm a belt collector myself. I collect belts. I collect replicas and I collect real belts. Dude, those things are heavy. Those things are astronomically heavy. I do not know how she holds all of those titles. I don't know. But everybody's worried that Mercedes Moné is going to go over. Now, there are pros and cons to Mercedes Moné going over in this match. There are pros and cons. The con is that people are going to be upset when Mercedes Moné wins because a lot of people on social media are accusing Mercedes Moné of putting herself over and making everybody else look bad and making everything about her. Like they're comparing Mercedes Moné to Hulk Hogan in the sense that she has creative control backstage. I'm going to go over, not you, which is unrealistic at all. I don't think Tony Khan bent over backwards to give 100% creative control to Mercedes Moné. I think that's a very ludicrous idea. I think he gave the power of giving input to her work to Tony Khan. It's a very different thing. Having input and having full creative control are completely two different things. They're completely two different things. So if she wins, a lot of fans are going to be upset because a lot of fans just don't want to see Mercedes Moné win the AEW Women's World Championship. But at the same time, if she does win, it actually creates a very intriguing scenario. Because if she does win the AEW Women's World Championship, she's essentially going to run the entire women's division. And now it's up to AEW to build somebody up from the ground up in order to dethrone Mercedes Moné of the AEW Women's title. Now, granted, her run in AEW throughout the past year has been kind of disappointing. I like Mercedes Moné, but I haven't really been interested in a lot of work that she's been doing. But a story of her having, I don't want to say a reign of terror because I feel like I'm saying it in a bad sense. Her having a run as the AEW Women's Champion and essentially dominating the entire women's division only for somebody else to come up and dethrone her. It can be a pretty intriguing story, but AEW has to make it an intriguing story, if that makes any sense. So I want Toni Storm to win, but looking in hindsight, or not even looking in hindsight, but looking at it from a realistic standpoint, I think Mercedes Moné is going to go over in this match. I think there's no doubt about it. Mercedes Moné is 100% going to go over in this match. Moving on, we got the Texas Death Match for the AEW World Championship. Jon Moxley, who's been holding the AEW World Championship hostage in a frickin' briefcase, take on the winner of the Owen Hart Cup tournament, Hangman Adam Page. Now, everybody wants Hangman Page to win, me included. I think Hangman Page is the perfect guy to dethrone Jon Moxley. He is the only guy to dethrone Jon Moxley. The only guy. I was an advocate for Darby Allin before, but I've come to the realization, especially if you've been watching AEW TV throughout the past couple of weeks, if you look at the reactions that Hangman Page has been getting, dude, there's no buts or ifs. Hangman Page is the freaking guy. AEW has to pull the trigger. End off. Pull the trigger. Pull the trigger and crown Hangman Page as your champion. Hangman Page has been one of the very few bright spots in AEW throughout the past 2 years. He's been one of the very few bright spots in AEW. And if you really think about it, Hangman Page is the pure definition of marketability. He is the pure definition of marketability. You can market Hangman Page as your top star. You can market Hangman Page as your top star. Now, I know there's been a lot of discourse about this being a Texas death match. A lot of people are afraid that this match is going to involve a lot of interference, considering this match is a Texas death match, which means there's no DQ. But even if this match was no DQ, even if this match, even if this match had DQ, like, think about this. Even if it wasn't a no DQ match, there would have still been interference regardless. But you can tell that this match is going to be overbooked to hell. It's going to be a great match. I mean, Jon Moxley and Hangman Page have had a Texas death match before, and it was considered arguably one of the best matches of 2023. It was a fantastic match. But I was listening to Brian Alvarez on Wrestling Observer Live fairly recently, and he stated that Hangman Page, they had a Texas death match before, but AEW hasn't mentioned the fact that they had a Texas death match before. It's like they're trying to like erase that Texas death match, which I don't see that being the case, but it's very true they haven't mentioned that Texas death match, because eventually if they do mention that Hangman Page beat Jon Moxley before, then it's gonna ruin everything, which I don't think is gonna be the case, but I mean, I could see AEW's perspective on that. But in terms of this match being a Texas death match, I think it's going to be overbooked to hell in a good way. It's going to be very overbooked, especially near the end. A lot of people are even making the argument that this match is going to be very similar to the end of Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40, which, if you guys watch that match, I think every wrestling fan has watched that match. That match was overbooked to hell. You had interferences from Solo Sikoa, John Cena, The Undertaker, The Bloodline. It was interferences left and right. Seth Rollins. It was craziness. I think we're going to be getting something similar in terms of this match, in terms of Jon Moxley and Hangman Page. Could we have a sense of Darby Allin? If he doesn't return at the Casino Gauntlet, I do believe Darby Allin will return. But what if we have a scenario in which Darby Allin comes back and helps Hangman Page get the win? So then what you're able to do is, essentially, if you have Darby Allin essentially help Hangman Page win the AEW World Championship, Hangman Page is your champion, and he's riding off into the sunset, and what I assume his first feud as AEW champion, it's going to be MJF. Meanwhile, you still have the Death Riders running rampant, and Jon Moxley wants to go after Darby Allin. You have another feud right there with Darby Allin and Jon Moxley. So Darby Allin doesn't necessarily need to be the guy to dethrone Jon Moxley, but Jon Moxley can still have a full-blown feud with Darby Allin once he comes back, because he is the guy that essentially cost Jon Moxley the AEW World Championship. I'm just thinking of scenarios right over here. I'm just thinking of scenarios. If there's one thing that AEW needs right now, they need compelling feuds, and they need compelling storylines. An MJF and Hangman Page feud is 100% compelling. A Jon Moxley and Darby Allin feud is 100% compelling. And it doesn't need to involve the World Championship. It doesn't need to involve the world. That's just me throwing ideas out the window. We're not throwing out the window, but throwing the ideas out there. But I will say this. This is the perfect opportunity for AEW to pull the trigger on Hangman Page. The Death Rider storyline has been deemed a failure. I don't care what anybody says. It has been deemed a failure. It has been deemed a failure. Why? It's because there was nothing different about the Death Riders. There were just other heels on the roster. They were just another group of heels on the roster. That's it. They were not the modern version of the NWO. I know a lot of people compare them to the NWO. They are nowhere near. They are nowhere near like the NWO. I'm sorry. They are nothing like the NWO. AEW loves their takeover storylines, I know, but they are nothing like the NWO. I will say this, though. I feel like the Death Riders now, from a storyline perspective, I feel like they're more of a greater threat. And that's a good thing. But I think it's time to end the Death Riders. At least end the Death Riders in this current incarnation. What do I mean by that? I always tend to compare the Death Riders to the Judgment Day. Why are you comparing the Death Riders to the Judgment Day? That is the most stupidest thing I've heard, Ricky. Why would you compare it to the Judgment Day? Now, on paper, it does sound stupid. But what do I mean when I compare the Death Riders to the Judgment Day? If you guys don't remember when they first started doing the Judgment Day back in 2022, it was with Edge as a heel and Damian Priest, and then Rhea Ripley came along. The Judgment Day is a very different group than it was a year later. The Judgment Day last year is a completely different group than it was in the beginning. The Judgment Day now is 100% a fairly different group than it was in the beginning. What do I mean when I say this? Repackage the Death Riders into something different. Keep them around. Keep the Death Riders around. But and I don't want to necessarily say repackage them, but change their motives from a creative standpoint. Change their motives from a creative standpoint. Have them do something different that is not taking over AEW. Change their motives a little bit to the point where people actually start to like the Death Riders. That's all I'm going to say about that. But in terms of taking over and being a main event stable, no. I think that has ultimately failed. But at the end of the day, Hangman Page is going to be your new AEW World Champion, and he is going to be the savior of AEW, and he's going to beat Jon Moxley and dethrone him and take his AEW World Championship. So those are my thoughts on All In Texas. All right, continuing on with the WrestleHavoc Podcast. Before we get into all this craziness, please make sure to like and subscribe to the WrestleHavoc channel right here on YouTube, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the friggin' referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. Also, I would like to thank everybody that is watching on the WNN platforms, whether that is on the app or on the WNN Facebook page or YouTube channel. Shout out to all you guys that are watching currently live on those pages right now. And continuing on with the WrestleHavoc Podcast, it is Sunday, July 6th, 2025. Happy 4th of July weekend. I hope you guys all celebrated your Independence Day with all your families. I know I did. I had a great time and had some great food. Man. You know, we got a lot of things happening this coming weekend. It's crazy. We have a lot of things happening this weekend. We not only have all those 3 shows, but outside of wrestling, man, Superman is coming out, and I'm very excited for Superman. Like, I really, like, I'm not even a big DC fan, and I myself am excited for Superman. Like, dude, I'm going to be watching that movie on Friday. I'm excited. I hope that movie is absolutely great. And I know a lot of the Snyder fans are upset about that, but I don't care what they think. All right, back to talking about wrestling, because this is a wrestling podcast. All right. Let's talk about, let's continue on with the WrestleHavoc Podcast. All right, we got Saturday night's main event. Man. Of course, WWE being their petty selves, they put 3 shows up against AEW's biggest show of the year. 3 shows. And the first show is Saturday night's main event. Now, imagine AEW going head-to-head with Saturday night's main event. I guarantee you a lot of people are going to watch Saturday night's main event. Not a lot of people are going to be watching All In. But looking at the card for Saturday night's main event, it is actually not a bad show. There are 3 matches announced for this show. And the matches are Drew McIntyre, who recently made his return this past Friday on SmackDown. He called himself the Alpha has returned. The Alpha has returned. Drew McIntyre is one of my favorite acts on WWE TV. We got a match between him and Randy Orton. Of course, Randy Orton, after losing to Cody Rhodes at Night of Champions, Randy Orton told Cody Rhodes, "You beat me fair and square, but I urge you to beat John Cena. I don't like it when you beat me only to lose at SummerSlam. I want you to beat John Cena at SummerSlam and take that WWE title from him." Could we be seeing a scenario in which Randy Orton eventually turns on Cody Rhodes? Because you know that is going to happen. But in the meantime, we got Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton. And I think it's going to be a pretty interesting match. I'm very curious to see what happens. Drew McIntyre recently came back, so I definitely do see Drew McIntyre going over. We got Seth Rollins versus LA Knight. Yeah. And I feel like Seth Rollins is going to go over. There's no bones about it. I mean, if you're going to try to establish Seth Rollins as a big threat, especially with this new faction, which is not gravitating towards the audience. I know a lot of people that are not a fan of this current faction that Seth Rollins is leading. But I think the best way to establish Seth Rollins as a top guy in terms of this faction is beating LA Knight. But we're going to have to wait and see what happens. I think it's going to be a great match. And then, of course, we got the main event. Gunther versus a returning Bill Goldberg, who's going to be returning in his retirement match for the World Heavyweight title. Yeah. This match is not going to last long. This match is going to be probably less or little over 5 minutes. Probably exactly 5 minutes. I don't think this match is going to be long whatsoever. Not only that, we got a lot. This is going to be Saturday night's main event, so you know this is going to be on NBC. And you know if a show is on NBC, there is going to be a lot of commercial breaks on this show. And this match does not need a commercial break, considering Goldberg wrestles quick matches. He doesn't wrestle long matches at all. I think this is going to be a pretty good match, but there is no chance in hell that Gunther, or I should say not Gunther, there's no chance in hell that Goldberg is going to go over and win the World Heavyweight Championship. I think it is a bad business move. A bad business move if you put the belt on Goldberg. That is a very Vince McMahon-like decision if you do that. Don't put the belt on Goldberg. Please do not put the belt on Goldberg. I doubt they're going to do that. Could we be seeing a cash-in with Seth Rollins? We're going to have to wait and see. We are going to have to wait and see. But I will say this. I think the match is going to be fine. It's not going to be bad. It's not going to be great. I think it's going to be fine. And that's Saturday night's main event for you, man. I'm going to be honest. I'm not really looking forward to this show. It's not a bad show, but I'm not really looking forward to this show considering everybody's going to be talking about All In. Everybody's going to be talking about All In. Nobody's going to care for this show. Well, maybe people are going to care for the show because it's Goldberg, but if there's one show that not a lot of people are going to be caring about, it is the show that is going to be happening the next night. And I'm talking about, of course, WWE Evolution. This is the second incarnation of the Evolution PLE, the first Evolution show that WWE held, which is essentially an all-women's pay-per-view, was all the way back in 2018. Now, you have to ask yourself this. Why all of a sudden we are getting an Evolution pay-per-view? If WWE actually cared about hosting an all-women's pay-per-view, don't you think they could have done one every single year after 2018? It's a very valid question to ask. If you really think about it, it's a very, very, very valuable, very valid question to ask. Why all of a sudden WWE is hosting an all-women's pay-per-view now? Why now? They could have done it years ago. They could have done it every year. This could have been an annual thing, but instead, they didn't do that. I'll tell you why they announced this show. I'll tell you why they're doing this show. They're doing this show because they know AEW is in Arlington, Texas with their biggest show of the year. They put 3 shows up against All In. 3 shows, and you cannot tell me otherwise. Now, you're probably looking at me and saying, hey, Ricky, why are you ranting right now? I'm going to rant because it shows WWE's hypocrisy. It shows their hypocrisy in a sense that they consider AEW not as competition, but their actions show that they do consider them competition. Whoa. They're competition? Yeah, of course. Their action has showed. I'm going to tell you this right here and right now. Are you going, look, NXT has the Great American Bash going head to head with All In. You, the average wrestling consumer, I'm going to tell you this, I'm going to ask you this right now. Are you going to watch that NXT show, which has, I believe, roughly a little over 700 people in attendance, over a show that by bell time is probably going to be almost 30,000 people inside of a stadium? Are you going to watch this NXT show over Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada? Are you going to watch this NXT show over Mercedes Moné versus Toni Storm? Are you going to watch this NXT show over Hangman Page versus Jon Moxley? Are you going to watch this NXT show over Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay versus the Young Bucks? The chances are you're probably not. Why? Because all eyes are on All In. Everybody is curious to see what's going to happen on that show. 3 shows going up against All In. 2 of them are not head-to-head, but one is happening on the same day as All In, and the other one is happening a day after All In. So they really want to steal that fire away from AEW. There's no coincidence. Not to mention Evolution. Why all of a sudden WWE is putting an all-women's pay-per-view event now? If they actually cared about women's wrestling, they could have done this every year. This could have been an annual thing every year. The last Evolution event was all the way back in late 2018. And by the way, that drew over 11,000 fans. Roughly over 11,000 fans all the way back in 2018. If you want to look at the ticket sales for Evolution, keep in mind, it's taking place in the same arena as Saturday night's main event, the State Farm Arena. And the Saturday night's main event show sold, it's almost a damn near sellout. I don't want to necessarily say sellout, but they sold a lot of tickets for that show. You want to know how many tickets the Evolution show drew? Little over 4,000. Little over 4,000. The Saturday night's main event show, which is taking place in the exact same arena as Evolution, is drawing roughly, I believe, over 10,000 fans. And the Evolution show is drawing roughly over 4,000 fans. Why? Because WWE has built this show very poorly. The build for Evolution has been booked like garbage. They're essentially I don't want to say hot-shotting a bunch of matches, but they're announcing matches left and right, and they have no build whatsoever. This is the same type of stuff that we all criticize AEW about. Because AEW would do this type of stuff last year as well. They would just announce matches left and right last minute and not care at all. This is you know what this show is called? You know what a lot of people call this show? A lot of people call this show one of those shows where WWE's like, here, damn. It's a here, damn show. What I mean when a show is a here, damn show. Fans clamorate. They are clamoring so much for something that they beg a promotion to book this pay-per-view or book this wrestler in a match. And the promotion books that pay-per-view or books this wrestler on this show. But not in a way that is genuine. That's what I mean when this show is a here damn show. WWE is not booking Evolution because they care about women's wrestling, because they don't. And you know what sucks? The women are actually put in a very horrible position here. They are put in a very, very, very horrible spot. A very horrible spot. This show drew a little over 4,000 fans in the same arena where Saturday night's main event is going to take place. That's a concern. That's a concern. Why that is? Why is that happening? It's because WWE was incompetent. WWE has built this show like garbage. They just announced matches left and right and didn't care. We're going to be getting a returning Trish Stratus, who, by the way, is almost 50. By the way, she's gorgeous, by the way, but a returning Trish Stratus taking on Tiffany Stratton. Why are you going to keep relying on people like Trish Stratus? I understand it's an all-woman show, but why are you going to keep relying on Trish Stratus? Rhea Ripley versus Io Sky. I'm not really that interested. Not really that interested. You're going to have a battle royal. Not that interesting. Again, WWE hasn't put any interest in the build for this show. And what sucks is that, I've said this before, they put the women in a terrible position here. Because now, what if there's a scenario where this show flops? I'm not going to say necessarily that this show is going to flop. I hope it's a success. But what if this show flops? Who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the women. They're going to create the argument that says, hey, women's wrestling does not draw. You see, women's wrestling does not draw. But you want to know what's my counter argument to that? They're right. Women's wrestling does not draw. Women's wrestling does not draw when you don't put the effort. Women's wrestling draws when you put the effort. The show is not drawing because WWE is not putting the effort. That's why. You want to know why this show drew a little over 4,000 fans at the State Farm Arena? It's because WWE did not care about this show. This is the pure definition of a here damn show. That's what it is. Here damn. That's what it is. That's what it is. And it sucks. Because again, I feel really bad for these women. I genuinely do. The only reason why this show is happening is because AEW has a stadium show in Arlington, Texas the day prior. The day before. They have a stadium show in Arlington, Texas. And they want to take fire away from that show. Women's wrestling draws when you make people care. Women's wrestling draws when you put the effort in building up the pay-per-view. That's when women's wrestling draws. When you don't put the effort, women's wrestling does not draw. And it's not just women's wrestling, it's anything. It's anything. It's not even it's anything. It's anything. If you don't put the if this was any other pay-per-view, I would have said the same thing. I would have said the same thing if this was any other pay-per-view. If you don't put the effort in the build, nobody's going to watch. I hope this show is a success. You got a lot of great talent in this card. But again, WWE they poorly executed the build for this show. Poorly. I'm going to be honest. I just don't care about what's happening on this show. And you blame WWE for that. How do you have 3 shows going up against All In? I mean, the people see right through the BS. They see right through the BS. Nobody's going to be talking about this show. Everybody's going to be talking about All In. Everybody's going to be talking about All In. Nobody's going to be talking about this show. And I say that because I'm a realist. And I tell the truth. Women's wrestling draws when you make people care. WWE with this whole build for Evolution, they did not make people care. They just threw matches, thinking that people were going to care. The build for this show has been atrocious. Make people care. That's what WWE needs to do. And if WWE actually cared about women's wrestling, they would have done an all-women's pay-per-view annually every year. How come all of a sudden they're doing it now? Don't you think with the success of the first show, which, by the way, that first Evolution show all the way back in 2018 was a success, you would think that they would do it every year. They should do it every year. But all of a sudden, but they didn't. But they didn't. Why all of a sudden they're booking this show now? They're booking this show now. It's because they have another organization running a stadium the day before. That's why. And it does not come off as genuine. It comes off as desperate. And it's crazy when I'm saying this because WWE, we're still in the era of WWE still relatively being hot. They're doing they're doing crazy business right now. They are the most successful that they have ever been. And they're still doing tactics like this. They do it because they can. And they do it because they don't care about anybody else but themselves. But that's all I got to say about Evolution. Let's do a quick rundown of the Evolution card. Of course, we got the Women's World Title match with Io Sky defending her title against Rhea Ripley. We got the WWE Women's Championship match as Tiffany Stratton defends her title against Trish Stratus. The NXT Women's Championship match as NXT Women's Champion Jacy Jayne will defend her title against Jordynne Grace. We got the Women's Intercontinental title match as Becky Lynch will take on Bayley, will take on Lyra Valkyria in a triple threat match. We got the Women's Tag Team title match on the line, or the Women's Tag Team titles on the line as Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez will take on Alexa Bliss, Charlotte Flair, and 2 other teams to be announced. We got the Women's Battle Royal, which we do not know who's going to be involved, but I would assume that we're going to be getting a lot of veterans in this match. And we got Jade Cargill versus Naomi. So that is your Evolution. It's not a bad card. I'm fairly interested in this card. I mean, look, Tiffany Stratton and Trish Stratus is a match that was literally thrown together last minute. A literal match that was thrown together last minute. And yes, I said it. I stated earlier that Trish Stratus is almost 50 years old. But I will say, Trish Stratus, in the ring, she's still great. I mean, the match that she had at Payback 2 years ago against Becky Lynch was phenomenal work. But, we have other matches that are great as well. But again, am I excited for this show? No, because we have All In the day before. And that's the show that I'm honestly excited about most of the time. Not most of the time, but that's the show that if you compare all 3 of the WWE shows against All In, honestly, All In is the most excited I am for all 4 of those shows. If you compare all those 4 shows together, All In is arguably my favorite out of all the bunch. Or the most excited I am for all the bunch, I should say. All right, moving on with our final topic right here on the WrestleHavoc Podcast. We're going to be talking about AJ Styles. This is going to be our final topic for the show. And so AJ Styles is in the news, and from what it looks like, according to those from that are close to AJ Styles, he reportedly has signed a WWE contract extension. And we're going to be talking about this right here. Of course, this report is coming from F4W Online. The original source is Fightful Select. Fightful Select reported that according to the sources, Styles told close to him that he has signed a 1-year extension. The outlet didn't have clarity on when it was signed or when it ends. In April of 2022, he said that he picked up an option and extended his contract, but didn't clarify how long it was for. It's also unknown if WWE added injury time due to some lengthy absences. The freshly turned 48-year-old said that earlier this year that he promises he will call it quits before he turns 50, and he isn't afraid of retirement. In the aforementioned April 2022 interview, he said that he doesn't want to work anywhere else and would love to work within the WWE if he had the chance. Styles is coming off back-to-back June wins over Chad Gable and JD McDonough. He hasn't wrestled since June 16th. All right, what are my thoughts on this? AJ Styles literally is all of the money that AJ Styles is being paid. He deserves every dollar because AJ Styles has earned all of the dollars and cents that he's getting paid. He signed a 1-year extension, and a lot of people were upset about him not going to AEW. And look, in a perfect world, I would love for that to be the case. I'm being serious. In a perfect world, I would love for that to be the case. But I will say this. AJ Styles, again, is almost 50 years old. And I mean this with the utmost respect. I mean, AJ Styles just doesn't do a lot of the stuff that he used to do. He doesn't do the spiral tap anymore. You know what I'm saying? But if AJ Styles is planning on retirement before 50, I don't blame him. I don't even want to say I don't blame him. I respect him for it. AJ Styles wants to do what he wants to do. And if this is going to be his last contract, great. AJ Styles has earned the respect of a lot of people. He's earned my respect. I've always been a fan of AJ Styles. Always been a fan of AJ Styles. AJ Styles, from what it looks like, is now a WWE lifer, and that is okay. And that is a good thing. You know, think about this. He spent the majority of his career in TNA. Left TNA when he was renegotiating his contract or renegotiating for a new contract in TNA. TNA offered him, what was it, a 60% pay cut? Which AJ was like, no. You know what AJ Styles did? AJ Styles bet on himself. He bet on himself, wrestled in Japan, wrestled in Ring of Honor, and then he ended up going to WWE all the way back in 2016, and he has never looked back. And I respect him for it because he is somebody that has bet on himself. He's somebody that has bet on himself, and AJ Styles is a pure example of that. So congratulations to AJ Styles. He signed a 1-year extension with WWE, and from what it looks like, this is probably going to be his last contract, his last deal before he hangs up the boots, which, I mean, again, I'm a big fan of AJ Styles. AJ Styles, you know, if he wants to call it quits, he can. He has every right to because he has busted his ass throughout his entire wrestling career. All right, that concludes the WrestleHavoc podcast. We definitely talked about a lot of stuff on this edition of the show. We talked about All In Texas. We talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about Britt Baker. We talked about AJ Styles. We talked about Evolution, Saturday night's main event. We got a lot of stuff that's taking place this week. And yeah, man, I'm very excited, man. I'm going to be going live this weekend on the WrestleHavoc channel. And I'm going to be giving you guys my live reactions for not only All In Texas, but I'm also going to be giving you guys my live reactions for Saturday night's main event. And from what it looks like, I'm probably going to be doing a live stream for Evolution as well on Sunday. And then I'm going to come back here for the WrestleHavoc podcast. But yeah, that was this edition of the WrestleHavoc podcast. Please like, subscribe, comment down below, push that bell for notifications, and be on the lookout for more videos right here on the WrestleHavoc channel, in which we discuss everything in and outside of the squared circle. Make sure to like and subscribe for more content. And as the freaking referee would say, ring that damn bell for more notifications. And as always, it is yours truly, Flamin' Ricky DeRays, signing out. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.